4 tests to be met in granting a minor variance as set out under section 45 of the Planning Act. The committee may grant an application if it is satisfied that the application or sought relief, 1, is minor, 2, is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure, 3, maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and 4, maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. So committee members, like myself, individually review each application, undertake site visits, and individually form an opinion. Committee members assemble at this meeting to render a decision. Staff will review any comments received on the application and also provide the planner's assessment of the application. The applicant or their agent will then be asked if they would identify themselves and if they'd like to speak to the application. Anyone from the public who requested attendance will be given an opportunity to speak on the application after identifying themselves by providing their name and street address for the record. Committee members will then, I'll chat with each of you to ask questions, make statements of opinion, followed by your decision, which is voted on by committee members. Members of the public watching live via YouTube, hi guys, who may make to make any comments are asked to email planning@ektwp.ca. So those comments can be relayed to the committee. Again, you must provide your name and street address and your emailed comments for public record. The decision of the committee on an application may be to grant the application as presented, grant the application with modifications or conditions if the committee feels the application can be improved, or to reject the application. A verbal decision will be made at this meeting, unless there's a reason to defer the decision. If a verbal decision is made at this meeting, a written decision will follow within 10 days. To receive a copy of this decision, you must make a written request for such to Secretary Treasurer, to the Committee of Adjustment. An email request for a written copy of the decision will suffice. If the application is granted, there is a 20-day appeal period from the date of the decision where an application can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Thank you for sitting with me through that. So the next thing that we have on here, I have is the adoption of the Committee of Adjustment meeting agenda. Can I have a motion from one of my other committee members? Yes. So there we go. We've adopted the rest of the agenda for today. Next, I would like to ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interests or general nature thereof from any members of the committee. Anybody? No, none from me. So we'll move on to the next part of our agenda, which is adoption of the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes from our last meeting. That was on June 26th, 2025. James, are you moving that we?
Yes,
With those, and seconder, all in favor? Great. So those are adoption of our minutes from the last meeting. So, thank you. We're now going to consider, move on to the application. So we'll consider application A0825. The application details were read by myself. This is the application for the Dustby property on concession 3. Oh, let's just go with 922 Kitley line 3 instead of reading out that long address. The subject lands are zoned rural RU. The applicant is seeking relief from zoning bylaw 1321 as amended to permit the severance of a rural residential lot. So the purpose of the application is to obtain relief from section 3.20 residential separation distances from other land uses of zoning bylaw 1321 as amended as follows. Section 3.20 residential separation distances from other land uses where a new dwelling must be located 300 meters from land zone salvage yard industrial and 130 meters is proposed. So I would like to ask Mike Sarney to review any written comments we received and to provide the planning assessment on this application.
Thank you. So as mentioned, the subject property is located at 922 Kitley line 3. The property is approximately 40 hectares in size and is currently developed with a dwelling, a barn, and sheds. As mentioned, the purpose of the application is to vary the distance distance separation required between the MS zone, so a industrial salvage yard, and future dwelling to be proposed on an upcoming severance application for the purpose of creating a new residential lot. Now, at time of the meeting, staff have received the severance application from the counties, and we are expecting to present it to the Planning Advisory Committee in August. Regarding relevant policies, the lands would be considered rural lands as per the provincial planning statement, the county's official plan, and the township's official plan. Limited residential development is permitted on rural lands by all 3 policies. The township's official plan also identifies significant woodlands on the subject property. An environmental impact study was completed to support the application. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal aligns the policies of the PPS, the county's official plan, and the township's official plan. Regarding zoning, as mentioned, the land is zoned rural. Section 3.20 provides regulations for residential separation distances. A minimum of 300 meters is required, whereas 130 is proposed. Regarding the 4 tests, starting with the conformity with the official plan, the policies of the rural designation permit rural residential uses. The completed EIS addresses the significant woodlands and species at risks and concludes that the proposed residential lot conforms with the applicable legislations and policies and recommends mitigation measures to reduce environmental impacts. Land use compatibility policies do not specifically address separation distances between new dwellings and the salvage yard uses. Rather, the official plan relies on the zoning bylaw for more specific regulations. The new dwelling is separated from the salvage yard by Kitley Line 3 and other residential uses. To support the application, water testing of a neighboring residential well that is located closer to the salvage yard than the proposed dwelling was completed. Testing concluded that no elements exceed maximum levels of concentration. Given that no negative impacts on the property are anticipated, that mitigation measures are identified by the EIS are implemented, and that water testing results were favorable, the proposed decrease in separation distance is considered to maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan. Regarding the zoning bylaw, as mentioned, the minimum separation distance which is required is 300 meters, while 130 is proposed. There are approximately 20 residential uses located closer to the MS zone than the proposed lot. Water testing of an existing closer well has provided favorable results. Additionally, there is a barn located on the subject lands, and as per the zoning bylaw, minimum distance separation calculations are required. These calculations required a separation distance from the barn of 216 meters from the new proposed residential dwelling, which has been met with the proposal. The proposal complies with all of the regulations of the zoning bylaw. As no adverse impacts are anticipated to the future lot or surrounding property owners, staff recommend that the request for the decrease in separation distance appears to meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. Regarding desirable development, the proposed use of the property is for rural residential use. The official plan policies support land division for this property. The supporting material provides rationale for the reduced separation distance. No other negative impacts of the property or neighboring properties have been identified at this time. Staff is of the opinion that the proposed decreased separation distance is considered to support desirable development. Regarding the nature of the variance, the proposed 130 separation distance is 170 meters less than the required 300 meters. While this is over a 50% reduction in the proposal, it is supported by a favorable EIS, water testing, and additionally, as mentioned, there are 20 other dwellings closer to the MS zone than the proposed 130 meters, and then over 30 dwellings, plus another 20 outside of our township that are within the 300 meters of the MS zone. Additionally, lands from Kitley Line 3 slope downwards from, the lands for the proposed development slope downwards towards the MS zone, also reducing the risk of water contamination. To build further from the MS zone would require further disturbance into the significant woodlands, which the EIS discourages. The MDS calculations from the livestock to the new proposed dwelling also eliminate other areas in the property for this proposed development. So given the applicable constraints and supporting information provided, staff recommend that the proposed decrease in separation distance can be considered minor in nature. Regarding referrals and comments from the notification and circulation of the application, no concerns were received by the township referral agencies. And then additionally, we just received information from the RBCA that they also had no objection to the proposal. So considering the 4 tests and the comments received with no objections, staff recommend that the proposal be approved with the following conditions. that water testing be completed for the well on the proposed lot when constructed. And that the conditions and recommendation measures provided by the EIS be incorporated into the development. Those include section 5.1 of the EIS, which is listed in conditions for general wildlife and habitat protection, as well as protection for species at risks. And this concludes staff's comments.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to call now the applicant or their agent to comment. Is that one of the people we have on site? Either, no? Yes, and any other comments to make?
He's been going to get a lot for her daughter.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there any member of the public who requested to be present at this meeting? No.
No.
Anyone online? No. Okay. So now I'll chat with my committee members to see any thoughts, or if you have any questions or initial comments. Now maybe Brian, we'll start with you.
The existing buildings that are there currently, were they there prior to the 300-meter setback being in place, or
They
are
were
they,
there before
so they are grandfathered into this set?
yeah.
So nothing new has gone into this area requiring the 300-meter setback, is that correct? Excuse me, my only, it's a large difference between the 300 to the 170 or 130 or whatever it is. And I'm going to listen to my other committee members. I just don't see it as being minor. That, and I'm concerned about the precedent that such a large difference can set before the committee for anything in the future. We've already heard that, you know, precedent being other buildings are in there, so it should be fine, should be okay. And I worry that same logic can be applied to a decision that we make if it's granting it with such a large difference in the setback being sought. So that's my concern here. I'm more than welcome to listen to everybody else, hear your opinions. I appreciate the overall intent of what you're trying to do, but as I say, my concern is the variance of the setback.
Thank you. Linda, maybe did you have any thoughts or comments, questions?
Well, I think to address Brian's concern, when I look at the aerial map, there are properties that are bordering right up. Back on.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. That's why I wanted to make sure that nothing new has come along that would have required something like this to have happened. Those properties have always been there. New rules come into effect to protect people or properties or wetlands or farmlands or things, and they're there for a reason. So perhaps that's why the 300 meters was put into a place at one particular time. So, and again, it's not, I'm not disagreeing with the purpose of what they want to do or with what's already there. I think it's setting the committee up for in the future where somebody wants to do something and the variance isn't as severe that they might be turned down for similar reason.
I hear what you're saying, but I think you have to look at the whole picture. You know, and the fact that there's already properties there, that's what makes this minor.
I agree
You know,
with that.
and I don't think it's setting a precedent. I think if those other properties didn't exist, we might have a different answer.
So you don't believe that any decision today would set a precedent for another case, not similar to this, but whereas somebody's looking for an over 50% reduction in a setback, that might be near a water plane or might be from an existing roadway, that might, they could say, well, you did it here, a little bit of a different circumstance, but you did it here, so why is this a problem?
I think it would probably be explained why this isn't a problem and that is.
Well,
You know, I don't think it's going to set a precedent.
fair enough.
It-
Okay.
James?
Thank you, Brian, for that view of it, because I wasn't thinking that way as well. However, stating that there is so much property that's been developed between even the storage yard and where this split of the proposed break off of that piece of property is, and I don't see it being anything that would be precedent setting. And I think as the committee, we look at each one of these as a case by case basis, and I don't know if we're ever gonna come across a storage or a salvage yard and a proposed house being built in the same proximity in the future, although we may. You never say never, can we? I don't believe that this is anything beyond mine, in my mind. I think that this is within what we're going to do, and I think it meets all four tests. Stating that it is in my mind.
I'll give some of my own thoughts here, because my initial gut was to agree with Brian, to be honest. Just because of how big it is, and I'm very sensitive about setting precedents personally. There's a big however here though, and I think for me, the big however is the supporting information that comes with the application. So the salvage yard issue for me, you know, like you said, is environmental concerns. We've already have a water test and we've already got a completed EIS done. That's actually very comprehensive. That to me is very convincing that there aren't any environmental considerations with the reduction in that distance. And that's where I think we would set a dangerous precedent, because if somebody else tried to do it and they were like, haha, I don't have to go by halfway. Well, you know, I don't think they would. If they were able to show that they had done environmental surveys and things like that, we would look at those as the full part of the decision. And, you know, yeah, all the other buildings there kind of make it really difficult for me to see that it would be anything other than minor to build another house in that area. And I think the other three tests are well personally fulfilled by this application. We always want to see more development and increased development and land uses like this. Especially like bringing your family and keeping your family close. So those are moving to me. And like I said, the only thing that I felt that the precedence was overridden by the supporting information from the application on my part. Do you have like continued reservations given those extra surveys? Because I'm very much in support of the conditions that are recommended.
The 300 meter setback with regards to this particular file. That 300 meters, in my opinion, was to provide safety, of course, and you're absolutely right. These things, the testing has gone through, and there doesn't appear to be any problems. And again, I'm fully respectful of what you're trying to do, especially in building another dwelling. I think that's immensely important these days. My only concern is the math on the amount that's being sought. In my opinion, and it's just, there's four of us here, so it's just me. I don't consider it minor.
No, that's fair.
I'm looking at the math. I'm not looking at the overall picture, the rosiness of what they're trying to accomplish, or the water tests. I'm looking just basically whether or not it's minor in nature. That one particular part to me is not. So
I think that's a fair decision, and I appreciate you articulating it so well.
and I don't, and for the public, I don't usually come to these decisions very lately. And I think in the 20 years I've been doing this, this is maybe the third time that I've disagreed with something. But it's just to me, it's just not mine in nature. That one particular part.
Did I make a comment?
Yes, actually, That's actually the next thing I'm supposed to do. If anyone in attendance has any additional comments or questions, so please.
Well, right in Jasper, and I forget what street it's on, but there was two brand new dwellings built there 3 years ago, and they are likely 50 meters from the berm of that junk pit. Right in Jasper, there's two dwellings. I think we brought it up to you.
So would they have not had to go through some sort of
Well,
approval
I
process?
have no idea what they did.
No, I'm just asking Michael,
Yeah.
if that's the case, it's 50 meters.
Yeah, so in a perfect world where everything was done properly, and I don't know the exact history on these ones, because I think we might have discussed them when we sat
We
in
did.
meetings. Yes, those would be caught through the rezoning review and planning process. I know that those are older I don't know.
They very well could have been 7 lots from years ago. I lived in Jasper all my life, and
So I'm trying to recall the specifics on it. But yes, any new development within 300 meters should have gone through this exact same process. I think those buildings were both built during a time where the township did not have a planner. Because me and Jim joined the township about 2 years ago, and I feel like these buildings happened before that. Because when we would have done review, then yes, it would have been caught in the process. I also remember there being some details to these proposals in terms of how the lots were created that might have precluded the necessity to meet that setback, but I would have to go back and get specific details if the committee wanted more information.
However, it happened. There were 2 houses built closer to the salvage yard since the salvage yard has been there. Like they're not all grandfathered
it
properties,
was,
which I
it
think
was
is.
just that.
And again, if something has fallen through the cracks, that to me indicates a bigger issue and a bigger problem than what we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to exasperate that
Mm.
by saying this is okay, just because they maybe fell through the cracks or got done somehow without before or after Barb left, when Melissa was here or whatever the case may be. Yeah, those two wrongs or potential wrongs don't make this right, not in my opinion. And again,
would be helpful
it's
to have
it's the
context.
math. It's the math that I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not adding up for me as far as that goes. But the benefit of this, there's
Yeah.
4 people, and so you, in all likelihood, so your proposal is gonna go through. It's just that I just have a problem with the math, that's all, and no disrespect intended to you
No, I don't.
or your family.
Yeah, 100 acres sitting there and. And help with bandwidth.
I get it.
Sarah, have we received any email comments via the YouTube request live or from anyone in the public?
We've not.
Have not. So at this point, we can take this to a vote, so I'll call on each committee member to state their position and vote on the application, or maybe it's just easier, it's like. This is, what's the best way to do this? All in favor of this? Well, hold on. I'm putting this to the question, all in favor to pass this application as long as it includes the conditions that Michael outlined earlier, which includes that water testing be completed on the well for the proposed lot when construction, and then as per the submitted EIS completed by EFI Engineering, that the mitigation members and recommendations in section 5.0 of the EIS related to wildlife and habitat protection and protection of species at risk be included. So with that said, can I see all in favor? And opposed? So with a vote of 3-1, and we do have a majority vote that will pass this application with those conditions as mentioned. I thank you for the discussion. This is definitely a challenge, and I thank you, Brian, for your comments, especially that this would close the hearing today on April 8/25. Thank you, everybody. Moving along, I'm just getting my agenda back to the top.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care now.
We'll now talk about application 80925, the Township of Elizabethtown-Kitley property at 11 Victoria Street in Lynn. The subject lands for this are zoned flood plan FP Rural Special Exception Zone 2 RU2 Environmental Protection Provincially Significant Wetland EP PSW and Agriculture AG. The township is seeking relief from zoning bylaw 1321 as amended to permit the construction of a gazebo in the floodplain zone. The purpose of the application is to obtain relief from section 14.1.1 floodplain zone of zoning bylaw 1321 as amended as follows. section 14.1.1 floodplain zone, where a park use is permitted but excludes the construction of a building, and a building is proposed. So I will call on Michael Zarni to review any written comments and provide a planning assessment.
Yes, thank you. So the subject property is also known as Douglas A. Scott Junior Memorial Park. Property is approximately 10 hectares in size and is currently developed with an old fire hall, which I believe has been removed since the time of writing my report.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's not big.
It's fine.
A shelter, which is also to be removed, public washrooms and other accessory structures. So the purpose of the application is to essentially allow a building in a floodplain zone where it is typically not permitted. And then for further context, the gazebo is proposed as part of the Lynn Beneficial Community project to honor a community member, and the application is being led by township staff. So regarding relevant policies, the lands subject to the development would be considered rural lands and contain natural hazards as per the provincial planning statement, county official planning, and county official plan. On rural lands, a variety of uses are considered appropriate, including park and accessory uses. The township's official plan designates these lands as settlement area, natural hazard, natural heritage, provincially significant wetlands, and agriculture. The proposed development is only located on a small portion of the lands of the natural hazard designation. All three of these policies state that development within natural hazards is generally not permitted. However, where development is carried out in accordance with flood proofing standards, protection work standards, for floodplain, rural special exemption zone 2, so RU2, environmental protection, provincially significant wetland, EPPSW, and agriculture, AG. Section 14.1 provides regulations for the floodplain zone, which is where the development is proposed. The floodplain zone permits park use, but excludes buildings. Special provisions of the floodplain zone state that no building or structure can be erected in the floodplain zone. Unless there is written approval from the relevant conservation authority. So regarding the 4 tests, starting with conformity with the official plan, again, no development is proposed in the settlement area designation, natural heritage designation, or the agricultural designation. The policies of the natural heritage designation generally prohibit development, again, unless it is carried out with the appropriate standards, including flood proofing, protection work, and access, and that the existing hazards are not aggravated. The proposed gazebo will be used as a shelter with no human habitation or other sensitive use. The existing adjacent shelter, which is also within the natural hazard designation, will be removed. The property has access from Victoria Street, which is not in the natural hazard designation, ensuring safe access to the site. And then floodproofing standards and protection work standards will be met through the construction of the gazebo through the building permit process. Given that negative setbacks have been mitigated and the structure is being replaced with another shelter on the property that is smaller, the proposed building is considered to maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Regarding the zoning bylaw, the floodplain zone permits park uses, but again does not permit buildings. Special provisions of the FP zone require written approval from the Conservation Authority for any buildings or structures proposed. Staff have now received those formal comments from the CRCA for approval. The proposal complies with all the regulations of the zoning bylaw, including water setbacks from the creek, yard setbacks for the property, lot coverage, and other separation distances from the EVPSW zone. Additionally, other locations for the site were considered for the gazebo, but with the other zoning regulations, other complications arose, such as existing development, existing vegetation, proximity to water courses, and then proximity again to the EVPSW zone. So as no adverse impacts are anticipated, to the lot or surrounding property owners, staff recommended the request for the construction of the building appears to meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. Regarding desirable development, the proposed use of the property is for a parking and recreation use. The proposed use of the building is for an open shelter for a park use. No negative impacts to the property or neighboring property owners have been identified. And then again, staff is of the opinion that the proposed building could be considered a desirable development for the site. Regarding the nature of the variance, the proposed building will replace an adjacent shelter that will be removed on property. The gazebo is approximately 100 square meters smaller than the structure to be removed, and it will be located slightly further away from the adjacent water course. Again, comments, written approval has been received from the CRC that support the proposal. Given that the scope of the proposal, the removal of the larger structure, constraints precluding other locations, staff recommend that the proposed building can be considered minor in nature. Regarding referrals and comments from the notification and circulation of the application, staff received comments from the CRCA after publishing the report. The comments from the CRCA spoke to that CRCA policies generally prohibit the development within regulatory floodplain. However, on constrained lots, new buildings and structures may be permitted if there's no feasible alternative site outside the floodplain zone. It also considers municipal zoning bylaw setback requirements to be minimized, floodproofing measures to be incorporated, and that the structure is located in an area of acceptable risk. The proposed gazebo will replace an existing shade structure and in an area of acceptable risk. And as such, CRCA staff are satisfied with the proposal from a flood hazard perspective. CRCA staff further comment and recommend that the finished floor elevation of the gazebo be raised 0.3 meters above the floodplain elevation as per CRCA floodproofing standards if feasible. If the proposed gazebo will be set back over 30 meters from the bank of the creek, and as such, CRCA staff has no concerns from an erosion hazard perspective. Further, CRCA staff recommend that native vegetation within 30 meters of the wetlands be maintained to help stabilize soils and protect the hydrologic function of the wetlands long term. CRCA staff comment that they have no objection to the minor variance, but will require the recommendations in their comments to be followed and that a permit be filed with the CRCA during the building permit stage. Additionally, staff received information from our building department staff confirming that they will follow the recommendations from the CRCA. Considering the 4 tests and the comments received, staff recommend that the proposal be approved with the following conditions. In my report, the first condition will be amended because that was a condition to require written approval from the CRCA, but now that we received their approval, I would like to change that first condition to that the recommendations of the CRCA be followed, including that the proposed gazebo will require a CRCA permit for approval and that permit be obtained during the building permit process. Staff recommend that native vegetation within 30 meters of the wetlands be maintained to help stabilize soils. And then staff recommend that the finished floor elevation of the gazebo is raised 0.3 meters above the floodplain. And then we also recommend as condition that development is carried out in accordance with floodproofing standards, protection work standards, and access standards, and new hazards are not created, and existing hazards are not aggravated. And this concludes staff's comments.
Thank you, Michael. Can I assume that that is also their comments on behalf of the applicant or their agent, or are there other comments from the applicant or agent for us to consider?
That would be coming from me, but I have nothing else in addition to my formal comments.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public who requested to be present at this meeting to comment? Didn't see anyone. Okay. So we'll chat with the committee members. Maybe James, we'll start with you. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I was out there yesterday and took a look and I see that other building is starting to fall apart anyway. And they're really, I mean, I don't see another place to put it that would it makes sense. I have no questions or comments. So at all. It's a pretty straightforward one for me.
Thanks, James. Linda, anything right now? Brian?
I'm gonna play bad guy again. Unfortunately, sorry, guys.
No, it's good.
Appreciate it. I have two issues. Not issues, but the lovely photo op with Mr. Smith and Mr. Mitchell. This was taken a while ago. So it begs my question, what's the purpose of this hearing? If we're already promoting this band shell, we're raising money, it's going to be built. And don't get me wrong, I love Sherry. She was an amazing lady. She taught me, for goodness sakes. But it just seems the whole purpose of us sitting here is moot. I have a problem with that. If this information that a variance would have been required was made available to the committee who's building the band shell and to Mr. Smith, was there a reason why they chose to sidestep everything and start campaigning and raising money for something that hasn't yet been approved?
To the chair, I don't have a perfect response to your question.
That's okay. I didn't expect one.
Okay.
That's okay. That's quite all right.
Sure.
I've sat in on enough council meetings to know how they go. But it doesn't make it right. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make it right. So the variance says that a building should not be constructed. Was just in the history of this, was that something that was in place when the other building was put in place? Or was that something that came into play after that building has been there for a few decades or whatever the case may be?
My understanding is the existing structures on site are all legal non-conforming. They would have been built under a previous zoning.
Then, again, I'm gonna play bad guy again, and with no disrespect to Miss Mitchell, because like I said, I absolutely adored her. No. It's a no from me. I don't like the process on this. I find it very I'm not gonna use the word insulting, but the work of this committee has been made mute because of what's transpired before it's even come to us. And there's a process that council has to go through when doing things. And there's a process that people need to go through when doing things. If it comes to a planning decision or a committee of adjustment decision, oftentimes those people take those processes undertake them at the peril of it may backfire on them in the end result. I've seen that happen where structures had to be removed or taken down because it was not approved at this level. So for that reason, I'm one of four, so I'm going to say no.
I appreciate
That's-
that.
yeah, I appreciate that too.
And it's a question I had. I was surprised to see that this was being asked.
They're raising money for this, and there's been no okay for this. And again, I love the idea that they're doing it. The band shell's would be a welcome addition to that park, but there's a process, and you don't sidestep the process.
So I
You
have
get what you want. So
a question for Michael. If we're suggesting that the existing gazebo is a legal non-conforming gazebo, would this count as a redevelopment of that existing legal non-conforming one, which would follow under the different tests that we would be using to evaluate that? Cause it's basically in the same spot, it's slightly smaller.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would consider this still appropriate for a minor variance. Not so much the use, because when we talk about the other function of the committee of adjustment, it is usually specific for the use, the extension of a use that's no longer. Not so much the buildings and structures. You see as the committee a lot of building and structures that are legal non-conforming that are applied to be expanded, and those happen under minor variance applications. The actual use is still permitted, so the park use is still permitted. So I wouldn't find that alternate cost is appropriate for this. I still think they're going down the correct route. However, I, also acknowledge the timing is a
So,
little backwards.
Yeah.
I could just speak a bit from my perspective, just to roughly address some of your earlier comments. When there was discussion earlier on in the process, quite a few months ago, not specifically about the fundraising, the band shell, but other work that was going to happen on this property. It came to planning, and we identified that CRC approval would be required, and likely a planning application in the form of a minor variance. I think there was a bit of a disconnect between what happened in terms of fundraising and the discussions there in terms of this media release versus what happened, from staff's perspective. And I think this is our attempt at trying to reconcile this process because of the timing and when we were involved in it and knowing about what was going on. So at this point, and also to clarify that if the committee decided to not approve the variance, Township would not be able to issue a building permit. And the process then would be that the application would then have to go to council for a zoning bylaw. And that this construction could not occur until that zoning bylaw would be approved, and then they would go through the building permit process. So yes, I agree, it is definitely a bit of a backwards process in how it's actually turned out. And at this point, we are, as Township, trying to rectify that, and how much respect I can have for the process and the fundraising that's going on. I'm acting as much as I can within my means to move the process along.
oh, and none of my comments were made to you personally or to anybody else personally. I'm just saying there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and I have a problem with this. But again, I'm only one member.
I don't disagree with your comment on that specific aspect, like it does feel a bit insulting. But I subscribe to the don't describe malice where ignorance could be at fault, and it might have just been somebody going, well, there's already a gazebo there. There can't possibly be a reason we can't just build a new one without ever looking at, now that's not okay. But versus it being, let's just do this and don't worry about our committees. I don't think it was nefarious. And when I look at, the application and what they're trying to do, if we reject it, I think it'll go to the next stage and get approved there, and we would just be holding it up.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't agree with you more, but just as homeowners have to do things the right way. And we're all there.
I completely agree.
The township has to do things the right, above all.
Absolutely.
The township has to do things the right way. So no, again,
Yep.
I think it'd be a mistake to, I mean, you're right, it's gonna go through regardless. It's gonna happen, I'm sure. But for my participation in this particular aspect of it, I'm not going to give my blessing. Only because of the way things have happened. And again, it says no buildings. So. I mean, what if we're going to always ignore or sidestep the rules or the bylaws? What are they there for? If we're always gonna,
Well, our committee exists to discuss the cases where we might adjust the bylaws, right? So,
absolutely, and whether or not they're minor.
yeah,
So, it's a pretty big leap from no building to a building. So to me, that's, again, similar to the previous one. That's just not minor to me.
yeah.
Regardless of what the use is intended. So again, maybe I'm just in a bad mood today, I don't know, but I no, it's a no for me. So if you,
I think your comments and your insights are extremely valuable. Is there anyone in attendance who has any other final comments on this one? No, any emails, comments from anybody watching live on YouTube? No, okay. So I'm going to say if we can put this one to a vote with to approve it with the following recommendations that or caveats. conditions. So conditions including following all the recommendations from the CRCA, including those related to the floor elevation being 0.3 meters above the floodplain and protecting native vegetation within 30 meters and getting the permit from the CRCA prior to any building. And then in addition, the other conditions that Michael outlined, which was that development would be carried out in accordance with floodproofing standards, protection work standards, and access standards and new hazards, to make sure any new hazards are not created and existing hazards are not aggravated. So with that in mind, can I call vote for all in favor? And opposed? So we have a tie vote, which means that this application would not be passed. Correct? So this one would be rejected.
I'm just confirming because I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah,
there's-
my understanding is that you need
You need
majority.
a majority, right?
Abstaining from vote would be considered as a non-favor.
Well, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know what, I'm on Brian's side here, and
Yeah.
I completely agree with what he's saying.
yep, so that we'll close the hearing on A925. It'll have to be discussed further with council. Moving on in our agenda, wow, it's a lot of pages back to the top of the agenda. Is there any other business for this meeting from anybody in attendance?
I promise to be in a better mood next time.
I don't see any, you're the greatest mood.
No, I think you're fine. Yeah.
The next meeting date is Thursday, August 28th, 2025 at 4 p.m. We have time for public question period if anybody online wants to ask. Yeah. Okay, so with that said, I'll adjourn the meeting today at 4:48 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody.